Okay. Assalamu alaikum, everyone who's tuned in. This is the first call of Muslim Wellness Foundation just to mobilize Muslim mental health professionals. And we felt it was necessary to begin to bring all of us together to network, to figure out how best we can serve the Muslim community if we're better connected and coordinated and able to respond most especially to the most recent tragedies in Chapel Hill, North Carolina, but also some of the ensuing acts of violence against the Muslim community around the country. And what we want to, inshallah, accomplish with the call is just, again, to begin to lay the groundwork for a more coordinated, connected Muslim mental health professional field. And so we have a few panelists. So the way the Google Hangout is going to work is that there will be several people in the Hangout as panelists, and you all will be able to view and also ask questions, submit questions to our panelists. So I will let you know who those individuals are. On the line we have Anjabeen Ashraf. Am I saying your name correctly?
You are, yes.
Okay. Yeah. And she is a doctoral student in psychology, and her dissertation is focused on understanding vicarious trauma in the Muslim community, and she will speak a little bit more about exactly what her research entails. Also on the line is Dr. Rania Awad, and she is a clinical instructor in the Department of Psychiatry at Stanford University. She is also the director of a new research lab at Stanford, the Muslims and Mental Health Research Lab. She is also an Islamic scholar, so I'm pleased to also welcome you, Dr. Awad, to the broadcast. And we're trying to work out some kinks, but inshallah we'll also have Dr. Omar Mahmoud, Dr. Halim Naeem, and Saud Anam on the call, who's joining now in just a few minutes, inshallah. So before we begin, I wanted to ask Dr. Awad if you could open up our broadcast with a brief dua.
Sure, I'd be happy to. Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim. Wa sallallahu ala Sayyidina Muhammad wa ala alihi wa sahbihi wa sallam ajma'in. We ask Ya Allah to please open your doors of mercy and to please enlighten us. We ask you, Ya Allah, that this gathering tonight is one of benefit, and that we benefit from what you teach us, and that we are able to help those around us. Ya Kareem, we ask you to please allow us to be conduits of good and allow healing to happen through us. Amen.
Okay. Thank you very much. And, the hope is that our intentions are, absolutely purified through this effort. And that we're able to, begin the process of coming together. There's just so many amazing, amazing things happening around the country in regards to Muslim mental health, and it would be phenomenal for us to be able to again link together and join efforts and support one another in the work that we're doing in our local communities. I neglected to introduce myself. My name is Camila Rashad. I'm the founder of Muslim Wellness Foundation. I'm also the Muslim chaplain at the University of Pennsylvania. And Muslim Wellness Foundation is an organization that's really focused on reducing stigma in the Muslim community as it relates to mental illness, addiction, and trauma. And we're seeking to do this through education, dialogue, training, and particularly helping the Muslim community understand even some of the basic signs and symptoms of mental illness, but also when the process in which people are becoming unwell, so that we can be a little bit more proactive about getting the support and the counseling that we need in order to address these issues. Dr. Omar Mahmoud just joined us. Can we hear you? Can you hear us?
Bismillah.
Alhamdulillah. Okay. Now we're in business. So we just started, and I introduced Dr. Awad and also Anjabeen Ashraf, who is a doctoral student focused on vicarious trauma in the American Muslim community. And um, I would like for each of you to just take a few minutes to kind of, for our participants, our viewers, to get a sense of the kind of work that you do and what your kind of area of expertise is in. We can begin with you, Dr. Awad.
Sure. I'm a psychiatrist by training. I'm at the Stanford University School of Medicine, and just recently completed my training here and joined the faculty as well. My work has been largely centered on Muslims and their mental health, primarily working with Muslim women. I think the interest for me in that has been kind of very long-standing, in that prior to medicine, I'd studied formally the Islamic sciences overseas in Damascus. And so I come to the field of psychiatry with a different kind of look, a different viewpoint, if you will, and also trying to see where the traditional kind of Islamic teachings fit in with our understanding of mental health and our treatment of it. The research lab that you talked about, Camila, that just recently also formed, is really several different lines of research, and one of which is actually looking at our Islamic history and past, by looking at manuscripts of people of old, right, our noble predecessors of old, and what they had discussed in terms of mental illness, because it was actually quite an active discussion, and a lot of progress happened in that era, but much of it has really been buried in time. So I think it's been really interesting to pull out as many manuscripts as we have. We're at like 115, I think, now, of just looking at what Islamic scholars of old have actually said about mental illness and how they have went about treating it. And then there's a big attempt there to try to see what kind of bridging can happen with what we would call modern psychiatry and psychology. That's one line of research that happens at the Stanford lab here. A couple others are about perceptions and attitudes towards mental health amongst Muslims, as well as figuring out religiosity, how religiosity factors into that, and how acculturation here in America or to Western countries factors into that. So a lot of things happening, inshallah, at the research lab here.
Oh, that sounds great. And, we'll, inshallah, have an opportunity to learn a bit more about some of the work that you're also doing with some Muslim mental health professionals in the Bay Area. But I wanted to kind of continue with our brief introductions with Dr. Mahmoud. If you could also say a few words about the work that you're doing.
Sure. Assalamu alaikum. I am a clinical psychologist, and my specialty is in psychological assessment and neuropsychology. And I, similar to Dr. Rania, I had, before going to grad school, I had sought sacred knowledge, with traditional Muslim scholars, and that was mainly just to get a sense of the tradition, not necessarily to become a scholar myself in the Islamic sciences, but to gain some familiarity with some of the traditions that Dr. Rania had mentioned from our past, from Muslim history. And then I completed my PhD and my postdoctoral studies. My focus, as I said, has mostly been in neuropsychological functioning and assessing people's cognitive states, their psychological states. And with regard to the Muslim community in particular, I'm also involved with the Muslim Youth of North America. I'm one of their national advisors, and I also serve on the board of Access California Services, which is a nonprofit that has a mental health component in its social service agency, providing services to Arab and Muslim clients. And one of my goals is to kind of develop assessment tools, proper tests, proper questionnaires, proper validated cognitive tests and assessment measures that can be used to test people, from the Muslim world, people that may or may not produce the same results when using traditionally Western methods of a psychological assessment.
I think one of the amazing things about one technology is that we can all be together in different time zones, but that it also provides a platform for us to begin to really understand kind of the um, really the vast kind of breadth and range and depth of the work that is being done as it relates to mental health and psychology and Muslims. So I'm honored to actually be able to communicate and network with other Muslims who are in the field, kind of thinking critically about not only sort of a theory around psychology, but actually how this applies to the community. So we got Saud now on the line also, but Anjameen, if you could also introduce yourself and the work that you're doing.
Yeah, absolutely. So I'm Anjameen, and I am currently a doctoral student in counselor education. I have a master's degree in counseling as well. And my research right now focuses on vicarious trauma. So when we think about trauma, there's something happens to me and that affects me. But then what happens to the people around me that kind of experience this trauma through me? And so that's really what I'm looking at. I think this is really pertinent in the age that we live in. If we look at what's happened in Chapel Hill, that really took off through social media, and that's how this movement built, and that's how really all of us know so much about it, because the Western media really didn't pick it up until there was this kind of call for action through social media. So, and it's still ongoing. Here we are a week later after this tragedy, and I see posts constantly. So my research is really looking at what happens to people when they are indirectly exposed to traumatic material as it relates to their Muslim identity. So in this case, these three individuals were Muslim. There's been tragedies that happened in Canada, in Kansas City. There's been vandalism of a mosque in Houston and in Rhode Island. So taking all those things cumulatively, what happens to us when we not only see it in the media, but then also we sit down with our friends and they tell us stories about how they've been discriminated against, they've been pulled off airplanes, and how does that resonate with our Muslim identity? And so I have a survey that I've been asking people to complete online, and it'll be really interesting to see what we find and how American Muslims are experiencing this trauma.
Okay. And thank you all for kind of being patient with our technical difficulties. It's our first call, our first kind of meeting together, so we can, inshallah, work through those as we move along. And Saud has also joined us, and so if you could introduce yourself, Saud.
Assalamu alaikum. My name is Saud Inam. I'm probably the only non-mental health professional on this panel. So I'm actually just a board member of the Muslim Wellness Foundation. I've been helping Sister Camila and the Muslim Wellness Foundation kind of network with various counselors and therapists across the U.S. And alhamdulillah, through that process, I've been able to meet a lot of counselors and therapists, and I'm really, really happy to see that we're starting to come together and realize the importance of this this field in relation to serving our community in a extremely tragic time like this. But it's just been beautiful to see everyone mobilizing from various fields, like civil rights to even the mental health first aid field, mental health professional field, and just in general as a community. So I'm really, really happy and excited to see how this moves forward.
Okay. And Saud has been extremely instrumental in getting people connected. I think that's one of his talents. So he says I'm just a Muslim wellness board member, or I'm the non-mental health professional, but alhamdulillah, I think he has been gifted in being able to bring people together, and mobilize very quickly. I would add, so I think it's indicative of just how necessary it is for so many different members of our community to be involved and really advocating for how essential it is for us to begin to talk about more openly mental health and our emotional well-being, and not just in relationship to the current climate, but we'll talk a little bit later about, and Ajmin, you alluded to this, the trauma of anti-Muslim bigotry, but also of racism, and how different members of our community are affected by that. So what I just wanted to, again, kind of frame our discussion, we would like to talk about the different ways in which Some local communities have responded, some strategies. We also want our viewers to ask questions, and you can do that. There is a Q&A feature, so definitely ask questions if you would like to submit to a particular panelist. But the purpose and the goal of the call, inshallah, is to begin to talk about what's happening in some local areas, how we can become better connected, some strategies that have been beneficial to address some of the harm that the community has experienced, as well as figuring out how we can continue to build and collaborate with one another so that we can really bring such a range of expertise and experience to bear on some of the issues that the community is dealing with. So, Dr. Mahmoud, I wanted you to kind of begin by framing how we can think about coping with grief, coping with some of the tragedies that have occurred from an integrated standpoint, from mental health as well as faith as a coping mechanism.
Sure, Bismillah. So I'm just gonna put my little timer here so I know I stay within an acceptable time limit. I just want to start. I want to thank you, Sister Camilla. I want to thank the Muslim Wellness Foundation and everyone that's involved in this Google Hangout, and anyone that's exerting these efforts to sort of make a more cohesive response. I think it's really encouraging. We have more and more Muslims in the mental health field, more and more Muslim mental health professionals, and so some of you out there have been doing this for quite a long time, and it's an honor to be able to share the ideas with you, for us to collaborate, to communicate. I think we need to move on beyond each of us sort of doing individual efforts and sort of isolated efforts, but then also at times coming together and being able to coordinate and collaborate. So I just wanted to acknowledge that, and all the Muslim mental health professionals that are out there, those that have been on the front lines, so to speak, of treating, educating, and counseling our community. And I guess I would start with, Sister Camilla had mentioned in my topic empathy, which is of course the prophetic model of the Prophet ﷺ. I mean, empathy and rahmah, or his mercy, are probably one of the most well-known descriptors of his character and his behavior, and his ability really to be able to deal with people in a huge range of psychological states. I mean, examples from his seerah, we see that he can deal with people in some of the most extreme, outrageous situations, and everything in between. So people who are very quiet and introverted, he had ways of dealing with them. People who are very loud or harsh, he had ways of dealing with them wisely. And people that had low self-esteem or low hope and sort of negative outlooks on the world, and people who were more deluded in their outlooks and maybe had an overestimation of themselves, and he had this prophetic, wise way of dealing with them, sallallahu alaihi wasallam. And so it's so rich that this comes from our tradition. It's such a huge resource for us as Muslim mental health professionals to have that prophetic model. I think when it comes to tragedy, one of the most important things is assessing people where they are in that moment, which again is one of the key characteristics of the Prophet ﷺ, is that he had a way of tailoring and individualizing his treatment, so to speak, to people that came to him based on whatever background they had, their circumstances. And when a tragedy hits, people could be going through different psychological states for different reasons. And so it requires some nuance when treating people, screening people, trying to figure out where the community is or where individuals within the community are at psychologically. And we know that most people are actually quite resilient. This is shown in a lot of empirical research as well. People who experience traumatic events, violent events, people in war situations, people that that are suffering under oppression. Um, it's not as if all of those people become psychiatrically, disturbed to a severe amount. Even children, they've done studies on children in the inner city who have been exposed to a lot of violence. It's not like all those children come out 100%, all of them come out psychologically disturbed. There's a certain percentage of the population that unfortunately is vulnerable, and they start experiencing symptoms of post-traumatic stress or these type of things, but it's not as if everyone has it. So sometimes just reminding people in our community about the resilience of the human being, and using faith to kind of infuse that and support that, it can be really helpful, and that in itself can be therapeutic. Just kind of reminding people about where we seek our strength from as individuals, where we get our sort of spiritual foundations from to help us through difficult times, and there are numerous, there are numerous ways to support that, from verses in the Quran, hadith, examples of the Salihin and how they dealt with difficult times. So, when tragedy hits, one, it's piecing out who are the people that really need our help, and there are some people, many people will be grieving for the loss. And that loss is usually, tied to the victims. So in the case of the North Carolina shooting, may Allah have mercy on their souls, many in our community were just grieving for the loss of these wonderful individuals, people that we may not have known, but maybe there was something in common you had with that person, or something you learned about their life, or just the idea that this could have been any of us, and how fragile that makes you feel about the world. So there could be a general sense of loss or grief about those situations, and so dealing with someone in that state, it may require a different strategy. Maybe it's just enough to remind them about Allah's mercy and the fact that these people would be considered martyrs, in our eyes, and that they'd be in the presence of God, and that could be something comforting for the family and for those who were survived. But there could be other people who have some ongoing pre-existing psychological difficulty, or some tragedy, some struggle they're dealing with, and this event then exacerbates an already existing condition. So they go to a place of hopelessness, or they go to a place of just completely low self-worth, that maybe they don't have any sense that people are going to they don't have any sense that people are going to survive, or that I have no future life. So these type of things would be someone who is more at high risk, I would say, and would require a different strategy to deal with them, or to help them in their struggles. So that initial assessment, that initial way of screening people and figuring out how are they reacting to the tragedy. Is it sort of a generalized grief about the situation, or is it actually a trigger for an already stressed out individual who now has this added piece and suddenly is in sort of a downward spiral? I think,
Dr. Mahmood, if I could ask you a question, who would you say or assess would be particularly vulnerable to that sort of specific grief that you're talking about, that may be triggered by the murders of these three students? And would that be young people? Would that be someone who's recently been through a trauma? Who would you kind of identify as being particularly vulnerable?
yeah, I mean, I think both of those are great examples. I think, anybody that, as I said, with the general grief, anybody who identifies with the victims in some way is going to be at risk, and feels that, wow, this could have been me, and that sort of is that first initial, people that make it through that first screening, I would say. But more specifically, in a more vulnerable state, would people that already have existing psychological difficulties, people that are already depressed and already have a negative worldview. This event could just be something that adds on to that, and is an unfortunate way of being that last straw that could push someone over the edge. So that someone who's already in a compromised state is going to be at a higher risk, as opposed to someone who is generally living a healthy day-to-day existence and then suddenly got struck by this tragedy of the situation, suddenly got overwhelmed by the grief of this situation. So that is going to be a different and more a more vulnerable person. And also then, as you mentioned, people that have experienced similar trauma or tragedies, people that are perhaps refugees that have just come from a war-torn region. This type of situation, is probably the last thing that they want to hear or be involved with, especially if they knew the people or somehow were in the community.
Okay. And we did have Dr. Halim join us. Okay. If you could just introduce yourself.
Yeah, Assalamu alaikum. I don't know if he hears me or still sees me. I'm so sorry about the technical difficulties. But I'm Dr. Halim Naeem. I graduated with my doctorate from a few years ago, in counseling psychology. I practice psychotherapy. Do you guys hear me still?
Yes.
We can still hear you, but we lost your video.
Lost seeing me. Okay. I don't know what's going on with my thing, but so sorry. It's been one of those days. But yeah,
No problem.
I'm the president of Muslim Mental Health, which is a nonprofit organization that is we have the leading experts, and we have the Journal of Muslim Mental Health, and nice website and good directory that's should be coming out pretty soon, and an amazing. You don't hear me now?
Yes, we can hear you but not see you.
Okay, all right. Sorry about that. And we have a really exciting conference coming up. So a lot of different things going on. Yeah, alhamdulillah, and I'm sure everybody's busy with a number of these events that have been happening.
Okay. Well, what I want to make sure we're also conscious of the time is about 10:05 now, but I wanted to make sure, since you made such a diligent effort to join us, I wanted to make sure everyone knew that you were on the call. So, Dr. Muhammad, you talked about identifying those in the community who may be particularly vulnerable at a time like this, and I wonder, what are some strategies, and Dr. Wad, maybe you can also contribute to this, strategies for us locally, because what I saw was a lot of kind of localized efforts in terms of bringing people together. So this, kind of gives us the opportunity to share what some strategies, some assessment processes that we've been able to use in order to address some of the immediate aftermath. So I would say, Dr. Muhammad, you first, and then Dr. Awad, what are some strategies that you've used in your local communities to talk about the most recent incidents, but also to address some of the issues that have come up for different members of the community?
So I mean, I think we've had unfortunately there have been similar events that have taken place throughout the last 15 years, and so there are times when things like this crop up and communities will get together and try to heal in that sense. I think my personal view, and I'd be curious also to hear Dr. Rania and what Sister Anjabin has to say as well, but I think I think there's a lot of education that can happen in these early moments that are really useful for people to sort of get together, understand what are things to look out for, what are symptoms that one should be aware of, what type of reactions are normal to this. I mean, there's an initial shock and sort of numbness that comes with tragedy. I mean, when you guys saw Dr. Suzanne, the sister of the departed, she has been doing these interviews on news programs, and she even said herself that in the initial stages, the only way she could even do those initial interviews was because she had this numbness over her, and she was sort of dissociated from the state. It's actually, and that actually is there's something there's a hikmah behind that. That's something that Allah has planted in us as a response to the initial stages of tragedy, that you dissociate a little bit from the event. Otherwise, you probably wouldn't be able to do your just normal day-to-day functions, because you'd be so overwhelmed in those initial moments. And so I think embracing people where they are, understanding that there's a trajectory to this is very important. There used to be a lot of efforts to do these initial debriefing sessions with people that have gone through trauma. Like, they'll send out a team of mental health professionals, and they want to debrief everybody that witnessed the event. And actually, this hasn't been shown empirically to prevent PTSD symptoms or symptoms of trauma later on. It's actually, in some cases, it actually makes it worse, because you're not letting people dissociate in those initial times. You're actually trying to force them to think about the trauma, to feel the trauma, relive it, and in those initial stages, it may not be useful. So I think I think there should be group interventions. There should be, but it should be done in this screening sort of process that I mentioned. That not necessarily everybody needs it. There are certain people that are more vulnerable, and identifying those people. You guys have done the psychology, the first aid, mental health first aid. These type of things are helpful in screening and identifying initial, people that are susceptible.
And Dr. Awad, what would you add to that? Because you're heading up an effort in the Bay Area with about 12 to 14 Muslim mental health professionals in partnership with Muslim Mental Health. So could you share a little bit about how that strategy to address the tragedy has been working?
Yeah, sure. SubhanAllah, the fact that we had been meeting as a group, our group here is called the Bay Area Muslim Mental Health Professionals, and we meet monthly, really to network and to get to know each other. And that's been a phenomenal thing, because when we first started, I thought maybe there'd be just 5 people that I knew and invite them. And I was surprised on that first meeting, about 20 showed up, and that was 4 times more than I expected. And as meetings went on, and as the email group sort of grew, we're at about maybe 70 members. And it's really amazing, because we all look at each other in the meetings and kind of say, and there's not so many people in person, but at least on the email group, that those who come in person to the monthly meetings all kind of look at each other and go, "You're in this field too?" There's definitely a surprise that these people come out of the woodwork. And people drive extraordinary long distances to come to these meetings, because they feel like there's no one else out there that's doing this work, when in reality there are other Muslims that are out there on the front lines with their sleeves rolled up trying to do this work, but nobody's really connected. So subhanAllah, we had these meetings going for only really a few months before this event took place. But the fact that we had a group assembled, we were able to meet immediately right after this happened, actually the very next day. And during that meeting, we decided to spend a considerate amount of time to actually just talk about the shootings and how we were all doing. That meeting was incredible, because it allowed all of us to process how we were doing. Myself personally, I actually know the family of the victims, so it was very close to home. Dr. Suzanne is actually one of my mentees, and so knowing her and knowing this is her family, it was, there's a personal trauma there, in addition to what everybody else was feeling. She's actually local here to the Bay Area, subhanAllah. So it's been really difficult, but in that moment, in order to go help others, we first needed to kind of process our own emotions. We needed to cry. We needed to grieve. We needed to really be able to remind each other and get that resilience going, and that strength to really be able to help the community. And in that meeting, we decided, we talked about Dr. Hanim with the Muslim Mental Health Organization sent out a message about offering counseling, and so we decided we'd join that effort, inshallah, at least locally. And 12 people at that meeting decided to volunteer their services free of charge for the remaining week, and others joined. So our group, I think, is about 15 people now. And so emails have been coming through and channeled through the Muslim Mental Health to the local Bay Area for anybody who is local. And we've been kind of splitting them up amongst ourselves to kind of help that trauma. And what I'm really hoping with that team emergency response team should anything else happen. And I hope and pray that nothing else happens like this again, but such is the world. So, having a group assembled that really is there and able to help each other through this is really important. And then having that infrastructure, I think is what I'm trying to say, in place is so important. To reach out to whoever is next to you and to really try to do that. And then to be able to process, and then to be able to set up maybe some sort of emergency response team. Our community, this is an overgeneralization, but by and large, seeking therapy is still very new and kind of very new kind of idea. But having it be free seemed to catch people, and so it's kind of like, okay, let me give this a try.
Free trial run.
And what we found, well, free is always good, right?
Yeah.
Mashallah. But we found is that people have been saying to the different therapists they've been talking to is, can I talk to you more? Can we do this more often? And that's a start. That's a start. What I've also found, since there's not that many emails that have come through, are the other events that people are willing to go to, like the vigils, the town hall meetings, the healing sessions, like the university students have asked, or like Berkeley students have asked for a healing session. Other people have said, well, what they're comfortable with is attending a halakha. Whatever they want to call it, I think we need to represent and go as mental health professionals.
Absolutely.
So that's what many of us did. We went to vigils, we went to town hall meetings, we went to, there's a halakha we're hosting tomorrow night, which will be a halakha which I'll talk about it from an Islamic Sunnah perspective of how you cope with tragedy and how you grieve from the Sunnah. But right after, we're going to have these, small group discussions led by trained therapists. But we're not calling it that right in the email, because some people may say that and go, but I'll go to a halakha, So whatever you call it, that gets people there, and from there you can identify, it's meeting people where they are, and I think that's what's really important to the strategy.
And I think I just sort of want to reiterate something that you said, is making sure that we are first taking care of ourselves, but then we are where the people are. Instead of saying, well, I'm going to wait for someone to respond to the email or come to my office, that it is in those places where people are coming together to be with one another, that we can, I think, really do some great work. Even if it's just saying, hey, I'm a mental health professional, I'm Muslim, and this doesn't have to be a kind of a scary proposition, right? They may, whatever stereotypes they may have about the process, or it's very Freudian, do I lay on the couch? I mean, we still have to have conversations about what therapy actually is, right? So I think for us, I think one of the takeaways is that, like you said, we are with students who may be deeply impacted, other members of our community, but I think most importantly that we acknowledge the ways in which we're impacted first, so that we can better, serve our community. I wanted to bring actually a good segue into what Saud wanted to present about mental health first aid, but also what we've started here at Muslim Wellness Foundation with healing circles, healing halakas.
So, so I'm gonna be very brief about this discussion. So, what we've been doing at Muslim Wellness Foundation is trying to get, I guess, before this tragedy happened, to get mental health first aid trainings all over the U.S. right in various communities. We did one at I think the first one was in Atlanta that we did, and we were able to train 40 imams and community leaders. And the funny thing is, like, we had focused primarily on imams, but teachers came out, like principals of schools. So it was really good to kind of get that that.
Oh no, I think we lost Saud. I'm sure he'll dial back in. But what he wanted to kind of offer, again, if we're talking about kind of strategies and different things that have worked locally. I'm a facilitator and instructor of mental health first aid, and that's basically a public education program designed to help community members, lay people, recognize the signs and symptoms of the most common disorders. So we talk about depression and anxiety, substance abuse, And, you know, getting people to understand that we don't want to wait until there's a crisis, but knowing the symptoms of someone becoming unwell. So what are certain things that we notice? And in that training, we also go over an action plan, which is ALGE, assess for risk of suicide or harm, listening non-judgmentally, giving reassurance and information, as well as encouraging appropriate professional help, and we stress appropriate, and also talk about encouraging self-help and other support strategies. And what that day training does, I think, sensitizes people to the idea that we have all been impacted in some way by mental health, by addiction or trauma. So being proactive about our mental health, and really stressing close collaboration between mental health professionals and religious leaders, because most people will say, I'll go to my imam and I'll talk about this, where there's marital problems, addiction issues, and the range of addiction being alcohol to pornography and gambling. So may talk to an imam first before going to a professional. So we want to make sure we're in partnership with religious leaders to give them guidance, and also, you know, to stress, you know, at what point in which perhaps what someone is seeking, they need additional support. So the mental health first aid, we've conducted in actually 10 cities over the past almost 24 months, training over 200 Muslims as mental health first aiders. And I think the most immediate impact that I've seen is a greater degree of compassion, you know, for people who are struggling in some way. And to say, you know what, I had no idea. Or perhaps now that I've gotten this information, I recognize that there are members of my family, you know, who are struggling, and now I know how better to support them. So we've actually teamed up with Muslim Mental Health and the last two Muslim Mental Health conferences to train imams. And, you know, Halim, when you talk about the conference coming up in March, you can talk a little bit about, you know, the kind of feedback that you've gotten from the training from different imams. And the second being, so stressing the importance of the mental health first aid training, just to give people kind of preliminary information about mental health disorders, but also I actually started a healing circle at Penn. I'm the Muslim chaplain at Penn, so I recognized that the end of our winter semester sort of ended on a note of either people kind of trying to come to grips with the impact of the non-indictments in Ferguson and also in New York with Eric Garner. It was also the Peshawar attacks in Pakistan. And then at the very beginning of the spring semester in January, it was the Charlie Hebdo attacks in Paris. So, you know, 2 semesters that were really kind of fraught with, you know, kind of local and international issues kind of coming to the fore. And, you know, I said, this is just an opportunity for us to come together to talk about how it's affected us. And, you know, what I encourage the students is, like, take what you need. Take compassion, take empathy, take support. But it's absolutely crucial that in order to be able to focus and to do the job of a student, that you kind of give yourself permission just to acknowledge, you know, some of that pain and that, you know, how difficult things have been. So what we're trying to implement and launch shortly is what we're calling Noor Healing Circles. Really, how do we come together in the darkness of grief and talk about, you know, the light within us, the light that, you know, can be brought forth when we are together, and really honestly talking about and processing some of these difficulty. And as you mentioned, Dr. Awad, we are encouraging when people are doing the circles, we're strongly recommending that there is a mental health professional in that circle that can, you know, possibly address anything that comes up. People are triggered in different ways. So if someone needs kind of either ongoing support or maybe wanting to talk a little bit more deeply about what's happening, that person is available. So, you know, something that's co-facilitated by a mental health professional, a trusted community member, you know, as well as someone who can help build trust and cohesion in the group so people feel safe. So those are the 2 things that we're trying to roll out shortly additional mental health first aid trainings, particularly at the Islamic Association of Raleigh, where we're contacting the professionals there who may need support themselves. I mean, this was a community where people knew one another. So our sort of comrades down there, other mental health professionals who may need support, reaching out to them, and then in the long term, continuing to facilitate these circles, so people, as different things happen, know that there's a safe space to go. It doesn't have to be as scary as a therapy or counseling session, but that they're able to find a place that they trust and that they find supportive and understanding and empathic, so that they can become more accustomed to the idea of reaching out when these things happen.
Just Camilla, one thing, subhanAllah, when you started listing the list of various events, that our community has kind of witnessed or that we hear in the news, it's almost like a chronic exposure, to
Absolutely.
repeated traumatic situations, that, as soon as we get over one thing, then we hear something else in the news that comes from another continent, and, and these are even if they're far off, it still has the impact on our Muslim, particularly the Muslim youth who are so plugged into the media, and this is what they hear these messages every day. And you also mentioned the idea of the people, the professionals themselves who may have been affected. I just noticed in the Q&A section, Brother Nasser Al-Amin, he had a really great question about just self-care for the mental health professionals themselves, and if we had any suggestions on that of dealing with the traumatic events. And so I thought that might be a good point to kind of bring up now, since you indicated that a little bit.
Well, Halim, I want you to, if you can, jump in here, because the Muslim Mental Health Conference, actually, the theme is trauma, healing and empowerment. So, I was, Allah is the best of planners, just being able to,
if we had any,
I think I'm hearing,
on that of dealing with traumatic events.
I'm hearing playback.
Now, since you indicated that a little bit.
Well, Halim, I want you to, if you can, jump in here. Echo, so bear with me 1 second. The theme is trauma.
Oh. Can I jump in, or?
Yes, go right ahead.
All right. Alhamdulillah, salatu wassalamu ala rasulillah, yeah, this year's conference, the Muslim Mental Health Conference, will be March 26th this year, and this year's conference is about trauma. It's called Faith and Healing, moving from trauma to empowerment. And there's going to be, I mean, subhanAllah, the response and the people that are coming, the excitement, the energy, the level of help that's going into it, the momentum, it's really amazing. And this being the 7th one, I don't know, maybe Allah works in things and in sevens. I think seven's my favorite number. I don't know if I could call it a lucky number, but I feel lucky when I have it. But anyway, but something different or special is happening, I think, this year. This is with everything leading up to it. It's here, Dearborn, everything leading up to it. It's gonna solidify itself, inshallah, and that was the vision. But solidifying itself as the main platform. I don't know, like some people say ISNA or what have you, but the platform that Muslim mental health professionals, imams, other professionals, teachers, lawyers, different nonprofits, organizations, and even governmental and legal authorities. We want this conference, and it's looking that way now, inshallah. We make dua, but this to be a platform, and not just a platform for all these different professionals, but we're going to make a move, inshallah, to get other organizations and other people to be able to present and do different things at the conference, so that it can really enrich and diversify all the things. So this type of thing right here, and may Allah bless you, Camila, for this type of thing, for this conversation and just inviting us on. But for us to be able to have these conversations in person with professionals, being able to cope, look at research, look at different things from an expert perspective, from us telling our own story, not people just doing research on us, but us having that experiential attachment to Islam, to the meaning of prayer, to the Prophet, to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, and then incorporating that into research. That can't be replaced. Right. You can read more books and read more, maybe even know more history and know something about Islam, but you can't read something, you can't replace and experience a taste that's in your heart. And you start to see this mesh and this mold of that type of marriage, internal marriage, at the conference. And I think it's being starting to be presented now. So we're really excited. We're really excited about.
So give us the dates. Make sure people know, because it's coming up soon.
March 26th. It's the Thursday, and it's the Thursday that the Department of Health is actually coming in, doing a training on trauma, an all-day training on trauma. Even other mental health professionals who may not, specialize in trauma, like I'm sorry, I'm a doctoral student. I'm looking at her, but but anyway, so even me myself, I want to sit. I'm not a big, I'm not that deep into trauma and trauma research. I know about trauma, but experientially, but I want to get trained, deeper into that. So I think it would be, for everybody, it's a really good thing, and they're doing an interfaith platform, and inshallah, we have the acceptance of the, and we're so excited. We can only talk about it. I think we can say it verbally. So this is a verbal discussion. We can't put it on painting. But alhamdulillah, the Surgeon General has accepted our invitation. So we're real excited about that. So the new guy, Vivek Murthy. So alhamdulillah, we're really excited, and we make dua. People's stuff comes up, but things like that really solidify the stance and the vision, and really the value that this country and the society has put on all of our collective efforts.
Right. And I want to just acknowledge that it's also as a result of how diligent many people have been in terms of shining a light on how important it is for us to talk about mental health in the community. I know not maybe just 5 years ago, people would be very wary, if you said, well, I'm in mental health, or, I'm a counselor, they're like, oh, well, are you analyzing me right now? So I think, yeah.
No, I'm saying, I remember, Omar, I know Omar and Rania know Hamada. I remember he was trying to tell me about, mental health like 10 years ago, like in 05, 06, about this, the journal and different things like that. And that was, it was back then. Even it's not even back then. It's like 9-10 years ago. But it wasn't even an issue. It wasn't even on a radar or of significance. And it's like, subhanAllah, the things that happen consistently. We can't really turn away from the newspapers. The stuff just came out today about the Somali boy that got killed like 2 months ago, and we haven't even talked about in Kansas City. The guys chasing him, ran him down. Like it's like Omar said, like Dr. Mahmoud is saying, like it's thing after thing after thing. Right. And then it's like, when do you dissociate? When do you turn on and off? When do you put your humanity on hold and different things like that? So it's relevant now with all these things happening.
Absolutely. So I posted the flyer to this event page, But definitely, if people want to go to Muslim Mental Health Conference on Facebook or tweet at Muslim Mental Health to find out information, new people who are presenting. There's going to be a lot of presenters. I have to say, this will be my third year. And it really starts to become like a reunion. You know, you look forward to being there again, just to be amongst other people who are thinking really critically about these different issues, and also to act as a support for, you know, the people in the field who, you know, we get burnt out, we suffer from compassion fatigue. You know, if you're one of the only therapists perhaps in a community and people are coming to you and asking for support, you know, you have to be able to develop good boundaries. And we you know, perhaps in a later call, we can talk about, you know, even this idea of dual relationships, right? So if someone in the community is saying, well, you know, I have a brother or maybe my sister needs counseling, could you be their therapist? But you go to Juma together and you see each other at weddings, and I mean, it becomes a very, very small world. Yeah. So even just kind of juggling all of those different relationships. You know, it gets to sometimes be a challenge, and I think, you know, again, as Muslim mental health professionals, how do we begin to grapple with some of those issues? I want to make sure we leave some time for Anjabeen to talk about, again, some timely research that she's conducting for her dissertation. You know, I want to support, again, Muslim graduate students who are coming into the field, because, you know, there's also a shift in terms of people thinking about even psychology as being a viable career, you know, option. So if you could talk just a little bit more, and if you have a link, we can also post that for your research.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you. So a lot of what has been said by all the panelists really resonated with me in the research that I'm doing and the reasons why I wanted to do this research. So I think Dr. Mahmoud talked about individuals that may have pre-existing kind of conditions or vulnerabilities and the way they interact with trauma material as compared to those that don't. Well, vicarious trauma is telling us that there's the interplay between the actual traumatic event and then also the personal characteristics of the individual, some of which may include personal history. So if we come into this with a personal history of being discriminated against or having some type of trauma, then we are left vulnerable. And so what happens when we are exposed to that material through what is called empathic engagement, as in something in that trauma story we connect with. And for my research, it's because of that piece of identity that we're Muslim. And so I think certainly when we look at what's happened in the past few months, particularly last week, but certainly there's been other instances that have happened before and since 9/11 really, about this environment that we're living in where a single piece of our identities is being minimized, it's being less valued, it's being held up as a way to treat us sometimes as second-class citizens. And so we see the rhetoric surrounding this, and we see violent events that can happen. And so how do we take that in, and how do we process that? And so my research is really focused on giving voice to the participants. And Dr. Naeem spoke to this about the lived experiences of an individual. And so I want to give voice to people and see what's happening with the American Muslim community. How are we processing this? Is there something that we need to address? And then once we get that information, in the future we can go on to look at what do we need to do, what strategies are working. And hopefully through this research is also a facet where individuals are given opportunity to talk about, in their own words, about their lived experiences. Hopefully we can glean some knowledge about coping skills and what's been working for them. And so I will give you all the link. I would invite everyone to participate, really. I want feedback from any American Muslims, because unless we know what's happening, we can't address it, and we can't kind of take a lot of these theories that have not necessarily been created with us in mind, and we can take those theories and kind of carve out a space for us that only we can do, because we're living that experience. So, yeah.
And I think, you know, when I saw your post and looking for Muslims to complete the survey, it's, you know, kind of another area in which we have to make some headway in the community, because people are sometimes very, you know, skeptical about surveys and information that's being collected, again, given the climate. So wondering, like, how will this data be used? Will it be used against us, you know, to show that we are in some way deficient? But again, because this research is being generated by Muslim mental health professionals, you know, who's interpreting this data, you know, in a context, you know, in a culturally competent way, it can give, you know, non-Muslim professionals, because truth of the matter is not every Muslim wants to see a Muslim therapist. So giving even tools for non-Muslim professionals to be able to adequately address some of the issues that Muslim clients may present with. And to your point about trauma, I just wanted to ask some of the other panelists as well, when we talk about Muslim mental health and some of the trauma that's being experienced as a result of anti-Muslim bigotry, I wanted to kind of raise the question about, you know, perhaps what you would call some of the complex trauma that maybe African American Muslims may also be experiencing in light of the Black Lives Matter movement, kind of ongoing police brutality, you know, at the hands of law enforcement, but, you know, other members of the community. So how kind of the racial and religious identity may also leave someone kind of vulnerable to experiencing trauma from different, you know, different aspects. So if, I don't know, if Dr. Naeem or Dr. Mahmoud, Dr. Awad, if you want to just kind of weigh in on that.
Yeah, I mean, actually, my wife, who's also a clinical psychologist, her dissertation was done in Dearborn on the effects of racism on the Arab American high school students in Dearborn, and she, in her you know, studies that she sort of was involved with prior to that, looking at the effects of racism in general. And a lot of it has to do with, you know, your perception of the racism, and that one's ethnic identity, one's religious identity are actually protective factors in that when facing such, you know, such stressors. So you know, whatever we can do to bolster people's sense of who they are, and giving them confidence in who they are and where they come from. Having a strong ethnic identity and having a strong religiosity in terms of your personal relationship with God have been shown to be beneficial protective factors in the psychosocial outcomes of particularly young people who are facing racism, discrimination, and these other type of aggressions in society.
Which is, you know, it's interesting because we're also in a week where there's the Countering Violent Extremism Summit happening in Washington, D.C., but you're mentioning, you know, religiosity and a strong connection to the Creator as actually a protective factor. And given some of the narrative around CVE, the Countering Violent Extremism, it almost in some ways acts to encourage, you know, sort of a diminished sense of, you know, connection to religion, because it's, you know, if you're able to, or, you know, willing to express, you know, your religious views kind of publicly, or in some way outwardly be perceived as too devout, you know, for some people that's, well, you know, maybe we should kind of keep an eye on that young person because perhaps they're susceptible to radicalization, when in fact their connection to their faith and to their family and community is protective factor, you know, against some of the other trauma. And Dr. Naeem, you look like you wanted to jump in on that as well.
Yeah, I mean, it's a number of things. There's actually a lot of traumas. We were actually just talking about this in the masjid now. We had a late night here, but we were just talking about the levels of trauma that are occurring, you know, both the long-term trauma in terms of black, white, and minority and legal authority relations, but also this dynamic that we were speaking of in terms of Muslims here who many Muslims who, how do I say, our immigrant brothers and sisters who had come here with a, I guess, a collective perception of, if we do what we need to do, make enough or what have you, go by the laws and the rules, then we'll be completely accepted. Essentially in the circle of, the powers that be. And we were just kind of talking about at one level, 9/11 kind of was a very clear line first that was kind of just more about perception. Somebody else did it, but all of you are suspect and on trial. Then you had the next level of things that happened afterwards, which is all the fallout. So now families and relatives and people being killed on other lands. Now we're at a phase. Now it has become completely real. It's almost like we kind of defined it like if you've ever been in love with somebody and they just hate you. Like they just break up with you and it's bye. That's traumatizing. That's like, and you've seen this, you saw this happen nearly 100 years ago when the Japanese didn't make it into the white box. The trauma that had on people. There was a number of suicides happening, and it can be researched further. But it's very traumatic when you're trying to gain a approval and a connection to a group of people, and it's clearly shown these acts of violence. It's clearly shown these acts of hatred, and it really makes one scratch their head. But again, we see this as an opportunity to reconnect to Islam, to reconnect to values, to reconnect to Allah in a way that has never been done before, perhaps.
And that is, and I think that definitely speaks to the resilience of the community. And I spoke with some sisters tonight, about what it means to be a Black Muslim woman. So kind of dealing with male privilege, racial privilege, class issues, dealing with kind of Black violence. I think these are the kind of some of the discussions that are beginning to happen as a result of some of these issues. And so if we are able to facilitate those discussions, and again with a mind towards healing and resilience and being able to point people to, understanding what their strengths are, and what those coping strategies can be, I think would be really beneficial. We have about 15 minutes left on the call, and I wanted to get to some of the questions that people have written in. Just anyone can kind of jump in and respond if we can just keep it brief. One question is, what advice do you have for someone who is new in the field and trying to work or gain support from those who are more well established? Dr. Awad, if you can maybe jump in there if you have any suggestions.
Yeah, sure. I should say that the Bay Area Muslim mental health professionals group that we have is probably only half professionals. All the rest are actually trainees and even students who are not actually in programs but are interested. We actually have a number of college students who are either majoring in psychology or interested in the field in general. We've also had folks show up who are not in the field at all, but are just sort of, or not even planning to go into the field necessarily, but just are interested in supporting mental health. So I do believe in this idea of if you build it, they will come. If you have it there, people start to show up and network. And I think it's almost a responsibility, the word amana, and a responsibility for those who are in the field to kind of take under their wing those who are still starting. And most people are willing to do that. If they're going to show up to a meeting like this, they're probably going to be willing to mentor. But what we've seen in the Bay Area, the groups that we've had so far, is not only is there good mentorship happening, but there's also collaboration happening. Different people's research projects and different people's that are writing dissertations or theses or trying to figure out where to go for a practicum, etc. There's been some really great discussion after the meeting as well. In fact, we kind of coined this term, the after party in the parking lot. That tends to happen, inshallah. There's just a lot of great, when you're all there in the same place, and I think Dr. Hadim was trying to say this too about the conference group, all there in the same place, so much good comes out of it. So I would really hope that an effort like that starts, and really, when you do find the people who are in the professional field and are able to kind of latch on, and even if you don't find them immediately, build something, even small, even if it's just a students' interest group. Start there, and then start inviting people in, and see what happens, inshallah.
Yeah,
Yeah, I'll jump
definitely.
in. Yeah, to jump in, I would say
Well,
that.
um,
I'm
Dr.
sorry.
Naeem, I'm just want to be conscious of the time because there are a few questions that I want people to be able to kind of weigh in on. One question that I thought would be definitely good to kind of answer live is are there any mental health support tools that specifically address the needs of American converts to Islam?
Right now, from what I know, I had to look in a number of things. A lot of them were coming. A lot of the Muslim normed um, uh, assessment tools was coming out of research out of the Journal of Muslim Mental Health. I don't know right now. There may be some, but I don't know offhand right now of anything that is normed on, normed meaning like tested and used and optimized, tried out on for the lay audience, on convert Muslims. I know that is a big area of interest with some communities to look at that, but from what I know right now, not specifically converts.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think that was maybe you're talking about assessment tools, and you're right. The sample sizes are not very large for assessment tools that have been normed on any Muslim American population, whether it be convert or immigrant or some mixture thereof, or second, third generation, whatever. We have amazing combinations now that don't even fit into proper research categories now. But I think also maybe the question refers to just general strategies and methods of mental health, sort of maintenance in new converts to Islam. I know that, Iman in the south side of Chicago and the Tetleaf Collective in the Bay Area, they have, particular programs that have been useful in supporting people who are new Muslims and kind of coming into the faith, and any difficulties they may face with that. And so those are organizations that I would refer people to at least find out what methods, what strategies they've used that are helpful.
And what about, so we had a question, any specific tools for college students, for Muslim college students in addressing mental health issues?
I mean, when you say mental health issue, it just kind of depends because there's certain things that, depression screening tools, other things like questionnaires that can actually be used, in the right context with a lot of Muslims. So I don't know, maybe I'm looking at the question a little too deep, but I think there's stuff out there, basic things out there that can be of some use, but it would depend on the context.
I think you should speak to that, Sister Camilla, about the chaplaincy and, alhamdulillah, I mean, when I was an undergrad, there was I don't even know if there was such a thing as a Muslim chaplain on any campus anywhere, and now it's more and more common, and, that's a huge resource for our Muslim students.
I mean, and I was an undergrad at Penn, and there was no Muslim prayer room, no Muslim chaplain. So, alhamdulillah, there is kind of a growing university Muslim chaplaincy. But I would say for Muslim students, I think now the issue of, I mean, it's developmentally appropriate to be looking at kind of identity and purpose, but I think there's extraordinary pressure now to understand themselves in this context, which can be very hostile, environment. So that even if someone wants to, explore their religiosity or kind of explore faith more deeply, to gain a better understanding, that is maybe not supported by the general campus community. So I think this is where, again, Muslim chaplains who may be trained more traditionally in, the areas of Islamic knowledge are also, I'm seeing, becoming more interested in getting greater exposure in counseling, perhaps going back for a master's in counseling or a certificate in, something that would give them a better understanding of how to deal with emotional well-being. Dr. Awad, you also had something to add.
I was going to mention about if there was a question on validated tools, and I definitely hear that there's really not much out there, but I wanted to offer that we've just completed validating a tool called MPAM, Muslims' Perception of and Attitudes Towards Mental Health, and it was 1,300 American Muslim women took that survey and allowed us to kind of validate this tool that's now an 18-question tool in case anybody was interested in terms of research. And similar efforts are happening right now at the lab. On religiosity skills, specifically to Muslim acculturation skills. Those are really missing as well right now too. So just wanted to put that out there. If people are interested, they're certainly welcome to contact me.
Okay. So since we're winding down, and I want to be respectful of everyone's time, what we wanted to put forth were several action items. So we want to have begin this conversation, but also kind of hold ourselves accountable for being able to kind of put some of these ideas, some of these strategies in action. And so one of that is one, we urge everyone, even if you think you're the only professional in the area, to begin to reach out, create a list, even if it's just something simple of local therapists, counselors, social workers in the area, so that, again, if people are looking for other options or someone with greater expertise, they can explore that. Secondly, we've posted about Nasiha Helpline, which is, go to nasiha.org. It's NASEEHA.org. And again, there may be places where there are no mental health professionals, so people can still, try to get the support that they need. Also, definitely email Muslim Wellness Foundation at info@muslimwellness.com. We're, again, trying very diligently to create opportunities for us to, to link virtually. We're asking everyone, if you haven't registered for the Muslim Mental Health Conference, to do that. You'll find more information on the Muslim Wellness Foundation page, but also Muslim Mental Health Conference. And, again, this is just the beginning, but we want people to begin to create kind of deeper connections to other Muslim mental health professionals. I think this is something that we need to kind of nourish our own sort of professional development in the field. And Saud, I know you had some other points that you wanted to make just quickly.
I mean, the couple of things I just wanted to add real quick is we want to, inshallah, we want to build a strong network of Muslim and mental health professionals and make Muslim Wellness Foundation the platform for us to connect. So we're welcome to any ideas or projects or programs you guys are doing on the ground, and if we can help support it and promote it via Muslim Wellness Foundation, please let us know. I just wanted to echo what Sister Camila said in regards to reaching out to your communities and offering your services for free, for counseling services. I know Dr. Vania had offered her services, Imam Nadeem down here in Atlanta, but we need more of the counselors and therapists nationwide to kind of reach out and say, listen, we're here for you, and also have contact us to help us promote your services. I know some of the counselors and therapists have offered their services nationwide via Skype and other online methods. But inshallah, I just wanted to kind of stress that as well. And like I said, sorry I cut off because I was tweeting and on the Google Hangout at the same time, so that kind of made my browser crash. So, but I just want to stress again that we're trying to create support groups called Noor Healing Circles at every masjid that would happen on a monthly basis. So again, if we want to kind of roll that out, and we need everyone's help nationwide to make that work. I'm sure the Sister Camila kind of gave more information about that, but again, we want this to be a movement, inshallah, and we need your help. And with that said, I'm going to hand it over to Sister Camila.
So just very quickly, if there were just a few items that I would definitely want people to kind of do now before you go to bed. Register for the Muslim Mental Health Conference. That's March 26th to the 29th. Also, if you're able to email us any feedback at info@muslimwellness.com. Our goal is to provide a platform for kind of monthly gatherings, virtually, for us to talk about different topics. So you can suggest if someone wants more information from other professionals, either regarding perhaps abuse, sexual abuse. We know the community in Chicago is dealing with that. So there's going to be a ripple effect in the community as we kind of deal with some of these challenges. So there are, ways that we can definitely connect with one another, since we do have different areas of expertise. And thirdly, Anjameen is on the call. Please, she'll post the link to her research, inshallah, shortly. Please disseminate that as widely as possible. The research that she's doing on vicarious trauma in American Muslims, I think, is timely, is necessary, is critical. So please forward that information as widely as possible. And in our last minute or so, if someone, I don't know if any of you have any kind of final comments or suggestions for the viewers.
Yeah, I would just, I'm sorry to talk a lot, but anyway, I think getting with people who've been through this type of trauma and these types of things, this is a pattern throughout society. So this is just an opportunity for all of us to connect, unify, like Saud and Camila, like we're doing and we're showing right now in terms of this conversation. It's an opportunity for us to share our experiences and be able to collectively gain resilience, and that's pretty much the only way that we're going to make it through something like this.
Dr. Mahmoud, do you have any final comments?
Yeah, I would just say that, I think this is encouraging. I think you guys have actually, inspired me to maybe set up a meet and greet of, Los Angeles-based Muslim mental health professionals, and I think that was a great point. Every city should reach out, even if you're in a location where you think you're the only person. You likely are not the only person. Either there may be other professionals or people on the path, towards becoming a mental health professional, or people just, as Dr. Rania mentioned, people just interested in the field and who are supporters in that sense. So I think these are great efforts. I think it's also a time for us to just also keep in mind our duties as true professionals in the field. I think in the early days of any type of movement, there can be some difficulty kind of everybody getting on the same page and sort of operating in a consistent and efficient manner. But I think we do have our professional ethics codes that we should be following, and that understanding that there are people that have gained expertise in various fields, and they should be looked at with that level of expertise. I think it's not that we should exclude anybody that is willing to be part of these efforts. I just think it also is helpful to educate the general Muslim community about what is the difference between a clinical social worker, and a clinical psychologist, or a counselor, a mental health counselor, and a psychiatrist. Mm-hmm. And these things are just helpful for the community to know in general, because there is a lot of misinformation and disinformation out there, and it's in the community's best interest to know more about the field and the different avenues and resources that are available to them, and because they may assume one thing or another, and that may not necessarily be the most appropriate thing for that person. So I think educating in general others about our field is another great point.
Thank you. And Dr. Awad, if you have any final thoughts that you'd like to share?
Yeah, sure. Since I'm sort of adding this very last piece, inshallah, I'll come at it from kind of a spiritual direction, inshallah. My teachers, when they for all the years that I was doing my Islamic kind of training and education, and whenever mental health would come up, it was sort of this interesting kind of, is that going to really work? But as time went on, and seeing all the momentum that's come, I've really learned this lesson from them, that when an idea is ready to be born, everything just falls into place, subhanAllah. And I really think that's what's happening here. From bad comes good, inshallah. We believe in the silver linings, right? We look for them, inshallah. And we let that kind of carry us through. So back to the very first point of, when the group met in order to go out and actually people, we ourselves had to make sure that we were in a healthy space to be able to do that. So making sure that each of us individually is kind of in a healthy spiritual space, because it is an amana responsibility to help others to be in a healthy space yourself. So that includes kind of spiritual kind of strengthening, and then reaching out to everybody else and making sure that they are in a good place. So just a reminder on that, inshallah, because you can't give what you don't have.
Absolutely. Yeah. Thank you.
Jazakumullah khair.
Yeah, this is awesome. Alhamdulillah.
And so, Najmeen, if you have any final thoughts, I'd also want to give you an opportunity.
Sure. I just think that I just want to echo a lot of what everyone has said about education and getting out there and kind of putting a face, hopefully a friendly face, to something that can be scary for people. And it's going to take time, it's going to take exposure to these concepts for people to say, okay, this is not so bad, I can pursue this, it's not so scary. And then also I think in our efforts, especially at the beginning, we don't need to recreate the wheel. There's a lot of activities that are happening in our masjids, especially with the youth. I know here in South Florida, which is where I'm currently at, we're trying to interface with these events already happening and just taking small portions of that time and talking about mental health, or framing it as something else, right? Just framing it as talking about the Chapel Hill tragedy. And so we don't have to recreate the wheel, work with what you have, and form these broad coalitions to, help us get to people where they're at.
And so I'm going to, yeah.
Absolutely. So I'm just going to echo what Anjabeen said. Like, if there are any pre-existing ideas out there, we don't want to reinvent the wheel. The Muslim Wellness Foundation is just here to be a platform and, like, to network and, like, exchange ideas. Because I think the more we work together, we can have a bigger impact on the community, and also provide services in a more efficient manner.
Yeah. And what I'll just add very briefly is I think one of the things that we have to be very mindful of is that when we talk about mental health and we have a certain level of expertise, to always kind of turn our intentions, back to the Creator, and, ask Him to kind of guide us and protect us, and to bless us as we do this work, because, there's a certain level of trust and vulnerability, that people are, allowing us to share in their stories of their lives, and so that we can stay connected, and hold each other accountable as professionals, and able to build trust within our group, our professional group, so that we can always kind of maintain a strong connection to that intention, to kind of the necessity of the work, and that we need each other to do that effectively. So with that, I just want to ask that if anyone has any questions, comments, suggestions, feedback for us moving forward, again, connect with people locally. We are definitely willing, inshallah, to facilitate kind of virtual, kind of monthly gatherings. So if there's anything that, people want to kind of draw on the expertise of the community regarding a wide range of topics, please email us at info@muslimwellness.com. Definitely go on Facebook, like the Muslim Mental Health Conference Facebook page, like Muslim Wellness Foundation Facebook page, and also tweet at Muslim Mental Health, tweet at MWF National, Muslim Wellness Foundation Twitter presence, and give us feedback. We want to be able to, make sure that these conversations are relevant and resonate with the professional community, and also those who support and are mental health advocates. So, inshallah, before we go, if someone would like to, close us out with dua.
Dr. Omar. Dr. Omar?
Sister Rania, Dr. Rania.
Oh, please, inshallah. I started, you'll end, inshallah.
بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم الحمد لله رب العالمين الفاتحة أن الله يتقبلنا منا وإياكم ويفرج عنا وعن المسلمين. Oh Allah, we ask you to bless our intentions, to rectify our hearts. We ask you to allow us to bring benefit to our communities, and we ask you to help us in the healing and in the recovery of those that have suffered from tragedy and those that are suffering from any types of difficulty or struggles in their lives. And oh Allah, we ask you to dispel their fears and to wipe away the clouds of darkness and bring them into light, and allow us to be beacons of light to serve in your cause. وإلى حضرة النبي محمد صلى الله عليه وسلم وعلى آله الفاتحة.
Ameen. Thank you. Assalamu alaikum.
So,
السلام ورحمة الله.
Alaikum. Thanks so much.
take care.
Everybody.